What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be talking about master materials. These are materials that are parents of all other materials in your entire game. Now, there's two major types that we're going to work on today. The first one is going to be a landscape material. I'm just going to show you how I made mine and what works best for landscape materials, and just general setup so you can start making your own. And then we're going to also discuss materials that are used for pretty much everything else in the game. So, like, think about like assets from like vehicles to storage boxes to debris that might be floating around to actually like having different crystals or resources that might be nearby, even like your plants and stuff. Everything can use this other type of material. So there's two major types there. There's the landscape material, and then there's like your actual everything assets material. There is a third one, which is UI material. That's a little different. We won't be getting into that, but those are pretty much your three main archetypes for different types of materials that you're going to make. Now, the reason why we're talking about this is because, like the other episodes, I've been talking about pipelines and how to like make your stuff more efficient. We talked about this as in our last episode about a pipeline where you start with the idea concept, you go into the geometry, blah blah blah, and you make your way through the system. But if you watched, there was that section where we got to like the actual material creation right here inside Unreal Engine, but we didn't really talk about this part, which is the master materials. So in that pipeline section, this is what we're going to talk about today in this episode. So in order to do the material masters, the material parents, basically what we're going to do is we're just going to show the landscape material. And this is going to be something that can be used in many different areas. You want to make sure that it's easily swappable, modular. You can change it to like a whole ice world if you want to, or you can make it a desert world, or you can make it a functional kind of earth in general world material, whatever you want to do. And then the other one again is going to be an asset material. And I'll show you how to use that for pretty much any asset in the entire game. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to go over to one of our material folders. Let's start with landscaping. Okay, so this is my master landscape material. I actually did not make this because there was no point. This is actually for free on the Epic Games Marketplace. You can find it if you just look for master materials. You can find one that's for free if it saves you time. Because most of this stuff is basic, it just takes time to set up nodes, and you're going to start to get to a point where you're just like, yeah, this is faster. I'll just grab this. All it is it's basically taking, like we talked about before, it's taking your base color, it's taking a certain texture, and then it's taking a height map data, and it's merging these into different layers. And then we take those layers and we spit out the ambient occlusions. We spit out different data points here, and we're basically merging them all into like one separate layer blend. And when we have all of these things put into one system, the only real things that you're going to have to deal with, like this is basically set up to just be a master of everything. So they're all virtual textures. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be adding things like, if we go over here to our material outputs folder, let me hide my camera so you can see what's going on behind that. And so what happens over here is we're actually going to start setting up layers. This is what you'll end up doing if you end up getting this. And I'll put the link in the description for the one that I got so you guys can just download the same one. Under the input section right here, this is what you'll end up changing. So you'll be making physical materials for each layer that you want. It's a little complicated. Again, we're just kind of like going over in general. I'm not like actually showing you how to build it independently on your own right now. This is just for landscaping, but I wanted you guys to just kind of get a sense of how it's supposed to start looking when you actually have one of these master landscape materials. So yeah, you're going to end up starting off with like, this is for grass, this is for dirt, this is for sand, and these are different physical materials, not actual materials, but physical materials. Like, are you slippery? Are you wet? Are you grainy? Should I have grip if I walk on you? Should I not slide around a lot? So that's what these are for. Okay, and then also you'll be using these for receiving information from your character. If you're doing line traces, if you hit the ground, you want to know what kind of material you're hitting and stuff like that. Moving forward, then you can also do other stuff like this where you can actually add these procedurals where you can have, for example, little clumps of rocks that will naturally appear when you paint, little clumps of grass, and then these are actually little variants, I guess you could call them. Yeah, variants is what they call them here. And these kind of like allow you to make different types of grass, like clumps, like natural grass clumps. Like it's hard to say like 10 times in a row there. So, for example, like what you're seeing here, these are actually painted leaves that I painted independently on the grass. But if you wanted to have like normal grass here, you could do that. You could come into your landscape section where you actually do your painting. You could come over here and then if I were to paint grass, for example, it would include actual grass pieces, like built-in meshes already that I've determined from this section here. So that's like another way you can paint. I personally don't do that because it doesn't work for my game right now. Like that's not how I have it set up. I have it set up actually a little bit more complicated than that. But long story short, these are different systems that you can use to make your landscape kind of pop a little bit more. But all we care about is I'm going to give you guys the link in the description for this on the Epic Game Store. This is a free one that you can get. You can use it for whatever you want. And then you can kind of start reverse engineering from here. Now, all we really have to do, we don't really touch this that much. So I'm just going to close that. I just want to show you kind of like what's going on in there. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to one that we have made. So we made a child of this, right? 'Cause we keep talking about our hierarchy. So like you're gonna have a landscape material, okay? And then you're gonna make, let's say, planet one, Earth like. Okay, so you're talking like sand, dirt, grass, stuff like that. So that'll be like a version right there. And then you might be like, you know what? I want to make another version. This is gonna be like an ice world. Okay? They're all gonna come from that same master landscape material, all right? You're just gonna be making different material instances. So I'm just gonna show you kinda how that's done here. So, like, this one right here, for example, is I just called it Planet 1, and so what it is this is where you actually make all the changes. So we just right click on the main master landscape, and then we would just say, for example, create material instance. And then once you do that, you just name it, and that's all what these are. I have Planet 1, I have Planet 1B, and that's Planet Ice. These ones are actually old. I have to update those, but Planet 1 works fine. So let's open up our material instance, and you guys can actually see what the hell I'm trying to talk about here because it's super complicated. If you feel lost, don't worry. So this is basically a example. So now everything that you saw from my master material is an option. Okay, so that's the whole point. You want to make a master material so that when you make a variant of it, you can customize it. So this is for an entire planet. So this is like the variation masks for our textures, our actual like lumpiness that we want to have. And then this also determines, if we scroll down here, and these are virtual textures, by the way. You're always going to use virtual textures for the most part for a lot of your landscape textures. You don't want to use normal textures, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute. So this is like our generic cliff stuff that'll happen. So this we can change these to whatever we want. So we can just be like, you know what, let's make this look like something else, and you can change it, and it will look different for all of your rocks in the entire world for this variant that we're making. And then what you do is you can change. Let's see, let's scroll down a little bit here. So like layer three, we can change this to like beach sand. Layer 4, we can change this to it looks like I have it set up as dry sand. Desert, these icons are not updating right now, by the way, but they are different. Sometimes the memory gets weird in Unreal Engine, and it just doesn't update the icons correctly. So that's actually a bug in the engine. That's why they all look exactly the same. So try not to be confused right now. These are actually different textures, but they're just not showing correctly for some reason, of course. But anyway, so these layers, what these are is I'll show you right now what those become later. They become these over here. So if I choose to paint with, let's say, dirt, that's layer 2, right? So layer 2 is layer dirt. If we go back to our variant, layer 2 is right here. So this is layer 2. Okay, and then we have these. It's really confusing when these things don't have the right icons, but regardless, they're supposed to look like this a little bit, but they're just not like updating. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so these you can see right here it says forest floor. So these are like different textures. So in order to show you what they actually look like here, I'm just going to paint with it. So this is grass right here. I'll just do a little grass, right? So there's some grass. And then if we want to paint with some dirt, that's layer 2. There's some dirt. It's got to update here. That'll probably force it to update a little bit there. There it goes. So now we have some dirt. And that's pretty much all you have to do to start getting like a variant for whatever it is you're working for. This is sand. I'll just put some sand here. This is like beach sand. And the reason why I'm showing you guys this is if you get a landscape that's got like some pretty good variance in it, like for example, grass, dirt, sand, rockiness, snow, you don't need to make like a million different versions of a landscape material. You only really need like one or two, and you're pretty much good to go, and you'll have everything you need for your entire game. Um, so that's pretty much all we have to do. Now, in order to get to this section, I'll show you how this gets set up. So don't worry, I'll walk you through it. But I just want to kind of show you first, like how this is supposed to function, so that I can kind of explain to you what we're doing later on. So let's go to selection. Let's go to a different map here. We're just going to start fresh. I'll go over to my maps folder. Always make sure that you keep things organized. I highly recommend having a folder for just your maps. I don't know how you have things set up, but it's super convenient to have things organized for maps in their own folder. That way I can just know, okay, this is where everything is. Like there's a blank map. Great. I can just duplicate that. And we'll just call this blank. We'll just call this test map one, because I'll probably delete this or something or whatever. Also, fun little fact, when you're dealing with maps, I've said this before, I'll say it again. If I were to try to change this name now, there's a high probability that I can corrupt the map. So if you ever want to change the name of a map, you actually have to duplicate it and rename it like that. Okay. And then you can delete the old map. It's really annoying and that will take really long time if you have a big map that you just made, but make sure you have the names as good as possible. Come up with a naming system, come up with a structure for them, and get them right the first time because changing names to maps is painful. So we're going to add a landscape. So here's how you add a new landscape. You simply go to your selection up here. You go to landscape, and this will choose what kind of landscape size you want. We're going to do a really basic example here, but remember how I said you make a variant? So like this is my planet one variant. Um, Remember we were talking about this over here. This is the master, but we're actually making a child of that, which is the material instance right here. So again, just want to show this to clarify. This is our master. This is our parent master material called landscape master material. And then I made a variant called planet one. Okay, and this is where we do all the customization, not here. This is all default materials. But this is where we actually made things like, oh, layer one's going to be sand, layer two is going to be grass, whatever. And then if we wanted to, we can make a different variant and call it Ice World. So we're here on the variant. This is what I want. MI Planet 1, whatever. We're just going to say OK for now, hit create. And now you're going to see a big black box and you're going to be like, what's going on? I thought I chose planet 1. Why don't I see anything? Well, the reason why is because we haven't given it any actual uh, like layer information. Okay, so we have to set these up really quick. So here are all the different layers from what we talked about before. Remember over here, layer 2 equals dirt, whatever, layer 3 equals this, whatever. So those are right here. They just need to have their proper weight information. So what I recommend doing is you'll just set these to these layer properties here. These are actually really easy to make. You can just hit the little plus button and create layer information from them. Layer information, I don't really want to get into it too much right now because it really doesn't matter for the most part. But generally speaking, all you have to do is make a layer and slap the physics material on there. If you don't have a physics material for that type of layer, which is for that type of layer, you can just right click and make one. Physical, there it is, physical material. So you can just make your own physical material here. And then if you make your own physical material, you can then assign the physical material to this layer, landscape layer info object, and then you can use this layer to, to assign to this right here. So it's a little confusing. That's why I'm just saying for now, just hit create layer and call it a day. I highly recommend that you name it layer or something so that you know for a fact this is layers puddle. Because if you just hit click, 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 and you don't care, it'll be like layer 2, layer 5, and like these numbers won't line up. So make sure that you actually name it what it is supposed to be for. So like I know that this is going to be for like puddles, for example, which is layer 1. Um, so I know that layer 1 is puddles. So then I can just say, okay, layer puddles. And like I've already made these, you know what I'm saying? Like they're already down here. So layer 1 Oh, well, this is actually layer 0 technically, but now I have layer grass, that's layer 1. I have this one, layer 2, this is dirt, yep, and right here, this is layer sand, and it will automatically kind of, like, know which one it's supposed to go for. So as long as you make it, it should automatically know. You can see I have, like, different ones in there, see how this can start getting confusing if you don't layer it correctly. So just make sure you name it correctly, and you probably won't have any issues with your layers. But all we're doing is we're just assigning layers. Again, you can make these layers by right clicking create a layer, just landscape layer info. You can see the type right there. It's called landscape layer info object. So that's all we did. Or you can just click right here and hit create layer info that way. We're just assigning our layers to these materials. And now we are done. So now we can actually paint. So the fastest way to get this whole thing like painted up real fast is to switch to the entire landscape component. And then we want to change our brush size to full. So I'm going to choose dirt for now. I'll just hit click. And now that's going to make the entire thing all dirt. I'll now switch back to my circular brush. And now we can actually get in here and start changing things the way we want to. So I'm just going to show you a few interesting things here with this material. So the reason why this material is so good is it has built-in height map detection. So for example, if I grab my sculpt tool and I shrink my size down a little bit, and for tool strength, 0.3 is usually the safest for like painting over layers and being careful. Somewhere in the zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.5 department. So we're just going to raise this up, and you can see how it automatically adds rocks where it's too steep because it's sensing the height map data, right? Like there's height map data on this entire map. So it says, you know what, this is too steep. This should not have our normal material. This should have our default cliff material. All right. And you can set all this stuff up in that master material that I was talking about before. So really it's pretty simple. And we can kind of just go from here and you can start getting painting the way you really want to paint. I can change this to a different material if I wanted to, and it's going to take a minute to load the shaders down here. It always takes a minute per chunk, and see it just like blasted. It just sandblasted everything. So little strong. We probably have to go a little bit lower. We can go down. Oh, it reset my tool strength. That's why. Not sure why, but there we go. So yeah, like point 0.3 you can see is a little bit better. You can kind of like fade things in a little bit more. Um, but you get the picture. So that's basically how you can start using um, your actual master landscape material, and it's going to make your life really easy because there's really no need for. And see now the other thing, the reason why I labeled these layers the actual name of what they are is because these won't always update. Again, this is a bug I've noticed. Um, so I know that this is grass even though it looks like it's like clay or something. So it just again, the icons have trouble sometimes. Just always name things correctly and you won't have those issues. Or at least you won't be fooled by them, I should say. So yeah, now I can just come in here with grass. We can like make the top grassy, whatever we want to do. This is just a quick example. I'm not here to make things look pretty. I'm just here to kind of show you like a rough example of how you can start making things with a master material. And the cool thing here is we can use the same material now for every single map in the entire game if we wanted to, because as long as you think that all you're going to need is, you know, puddles, grass, dirt, sand, desert, rocky, snow, wastelands. I've kind of named these myself and made my own, but um, you kind of pick like what you think you're going to need. These are ones that I came up with, but you can make whatever you want. You can have like 4 grass ones, or maybe it's a desert world, so it's all different types of sand. But and you can add more layers, but generally speaking, you don't want to go too much higher than this because it can have other issues that you have to deal with. But long story, well, like optimization and stuff. But long story short, that's pretty much how landscape materials are supposed to work. And then it automatically just moves and adapts. Like even if I go down, it'll start creating those cliff materials. And those cliff materials are based on height map data. So it's pretty cool. Now, there's a lot of other ones you can get on the marketplace that are a lot more advanced. I'm just telling you from my personal experience, you're probably better off just getting the freebie um, and just learning from it. And then if you want to, you can get a better one. You can also add to this one. So, like, I've already taken this master and I've added a ton of my own stuff to it. Um, Also, just remember most of the textures that this thing's going to use, I've converted them all over to like virtual textures and stuff. So virtual textures are different. So we're going to talk about that next. When we go to our actual landscape materials, let's go to get rid of this, get rid of this, and let's actually go to a material here. So layer one, this is our grass texture. Okay. So if we go over to our grass texture, which I don't know why it's not looking like grass at all, that's odd, but whatever. So it's just a bug, I guess. So if we have our grass texture here, if you have a texture and it does not say VT, then that means it is not a virtual texture. Pretty simple, right? So what you want to do is you want to right click it and you can actually convert this to a virtual texture right here. Convert VT to regular texture, and then if it's a regular one, it'll say convert to VT. So you want to make sure that the textures that you're adding are virtual textures that go into these, because virtual textures are very highly recommended for landscape materials. It helps with optimization tremendously, and a lot of people don't know that. They'll just use normal textures, and you're just going to kill the entire game's performance because, you know, games like to, optimize things with chunks and memory allocation. So if you're just trying to like do these huge 4K textures everywhere, you're going to pay for it later dearly. So just make sure they're virtual textures. Also, fun fact, you can change these textures. If I just double click on this, we can see some more information. See, now it updated to grass. I honestly don't know why it's doing this, guys. But whatever. So now it's grass, which is what it was the whole time. You can change the MIP gen settings just to kind of like roughly talk about this stuff here for the MIP gen settings, because you do want to set these up correctly. This will add a lot of extra performance to your landscape materials. Have you ever played a game where it's, like, kind of blurry from a distance, and then as you get closer like this, like, you can kinda see in the distance it's blurred, and then when I get closer, it gets, like, sharper, so, like, this is a sharp square right here, and then it kinda, like, updates a little bit sometimes, like, right now it's being funky, so at least I can show you a good example, but you can see how it's, like, blurry out here, but it's actually crisp on the inside. So that's based on, like, how close you are to something, and it tries to determine, like, what your actual visual uh, area is. And basically, it's going to make it so that if I choose, for example, like blur 5 or blur 1, this will use a blur technique to try to like smooth that difference out. This will use a sharpening technique instead. This can cause issues with anti-aliasing sometimes, but for the most part, I just stick it on like this. You can also do just like no mip maps, but I highly recommend not doing that because no mip maps says, hey, just keep it high resolution for everything. That's dangerous. So you do want to have something like this, something like a sharpen or a blur on your MIP gen settings. And again, this is something no one ever talks about. So I figured I would throw this in here just so you guys have a little bit more clarity on performance. Because if you're like me and you're just getting started, back in the day, I remember I would put down a bunch of landscapes and I'm like, oh, now I have 12 FPS. So yeah, you definitely want to do stuff like this. This makes a huge difference. Do not use 4K resolution, use 2K at the most. Okay. Make sure it's 2K at the most, 2048 by 2048. 4K is overkill. It's incredibly overkill for landscapes because of the way that we have this set up. There's no need for 4K. And to be honest, this still looks pretty good. We get down and dirty here. Right now, my settings are kind of goofy. They're not like really updating correctly. It's probably because I'm recording and doing a bunch of stuff, but you can see what the normal resolution is down there. And honestly, it's not that big of a deal. So that's kind of what you want to do, is just focus on making sure that your textures are using proper stuff. So again, you can use blurs. Blurs are technically better than sharpen in terms of performance, but just make sure they're not set to no mip maps, because that's unnecessary. That's like basically saying don't do any optimization. So you do want to do something. And again, this is for ones that are virtual textures. See, it says virtual streamed. So yeah, that's basically what we do there. But also, I was going to show you if you don't, let's say you do have 4K in here, and you're like, oh crap, I imported a bunch of 4K textures. What do I do? You can actually just convert them. There's a way to convert these. Let me actually find one that is not a virtual texture. Okay, so like this is a 4K blueprint texture that I made a while back. Now, what you can do here is basically we can go up here to I think it's right here. Yeah, texture source actions, and we can say reduce size. Okay. And so, like, if this was a 4K texture and I was like, oh, I really wish it was 2K, I can just hit reduced size. And this is going to be our new size. So we can choose whatever we want our new texture to be. We would hit OK, and it would convert it from 4K, it would crush it down to 2K. All right. Now, just keep in mind that it's not really that uh, difficult to do downsizing, but it's very difficult to do upscaling. Okay, so if you don't know if you want it still or not in 4K, you should probably duplicate it first, and then just make this one 4K, make the next one 2K or whatever. So that's basically how that works. But anyways, so those are your textures. That's how you get things started with this material. Again, all this material is this is from a master landscape material, and then we make variant material instances of the actual planets that we want them to be like. I call it planet. It can be anything you want. It could be backyard. I don't care. But the point is, these material instances will have all the different flavors, if you will, that you want. So we got like, grass, we got sand, we got uh, tree bark, whatever it is you want on the ground. So this is what you want to paint with. And then once we have these in here, we can also adjust other things like the roughness, which will take the shine off sometimes or make it too shiny, depending on how you have it set up, and some other things. We can also use these layer actors that I was talking about before, these like grass and rocks and stuff, and these will actually automatically paint on the ground if we turn these on. I'm going to leave those off right now because I'm just trying to show you the basics here. But you can screw around with all these settings. And then you can also, at the very top here, we can change what our actual cliff stuff does. So remember like when we made these things right here and the cliffs automatically popped up. This is a texture, and I get all my textures here from Quixel. So most of these materials that I'm using, they're all coming from a texture that I got from Quixel. I know that the store is currently like in flux, so you can use Bridge, but for some reason it's not working anymore. You used to be able to like download it this way, but now it's saying it's not a U asset format. So I think you have to get them from the Fab store now. I can't be sure. They're always changing this store, and to be honest, it's pretty agitating. So, anyways, I was just going to show you really quick. You'll probably have to go to the Fab store instead of the Bridge store, or the Bridge plugin, and then like actually download the Quixel packs for their textures in here, and then drag and drop them into your folder under your content folder, which is a really annoying way to do it, but whatever. Sideline, this is the actual landscape material that I was talking about. This is the one that's auto and it's free, and you can use it for whatever you want. So yeah, this is pretty cool. I like it. I've reverse engineered a lot from it, and I've kind of like made my own from it. But it's a good place to start. Um, and yeah, it's pretty good. So again, I'll put that link in there. But it's if you just type in under the Fab store, if you just simply type in like master landscape or landscape material, it's this one right here. It's the one that's free. You can always check your filters and just click on free, and that's the one right there. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to make, or at least get into and set up your master material for your assets. Okay, so we're going to go over here, and I'm just going to show you what mine looks like a little bit. So all this is, okay, is all you have to do is right click, and we're going to go to materials, and we're going to create a material, right? And then you want to name it something like MMM underscore master material or main material, parent material, whatever you want to call it, something that you know stands out as your new master main material. And then once we're done, we're going to get something that kind of looks like this. Now, mine looks a little different because I'm using Substrate. If you don't know what Substrate is turned on as a native function. So we have to go to project settings, and you would type in Substrate. Yeah, it's right here. Okay, so it's in beta. So this is probably I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that this is probably gonna become pretty standard. Substrate's amazing. It gives you multiple dimensions of depth that you can have in one material. It's a lot more. It's got a lot more options. It's a lot more oomph. So I'm using Substrate. Please do not turn this on in your project unless you don't want to be able to ever go back to the old way. Okay, because once you do this, it's going to convert everything in your game to Substrate. And once it converts everything, you're gonna have a hell of a time going back, okay? So, if you don't wanna use substrate, do not do this. If you do wanna use substrate and you're like, "Screw it, I want the latest, greatest stuff," then just do it and call it a day. If you're doing an experimental test thing, sure, turn it on and learn from it, right? But I'm just warning you that you can't really go backwards once you turn this on, and it will warn you about that, I believe. So anyways, I just turned all these on under my project settings. That's Edit, Project Settings, and you just type in Substrate and you turn those on. Once you do that, you're gonna have to wait a while because it's gonna convert anything in your game that you had to the new version. It will automatically add this node and plug it in for you. So it will do all that work for you, and then you have to kind of like reconfigure some stuff. So this is something that you probably want to make a decision on before you get started in your game, if you can help it. That's why I'm doing this now, by the way, so you don't get screwed later and realize, oh, I wish I knew that earlier. So, I love Substrate. It's fine. I have a game on Steam already, and it's just doing fine. So there's no worry about it. It's not like it's going to break your game. It is the latest and greatest that they're working on. It is probably going to become standard. So use it at your own risk, right? I'm not going to be held responsible if it goes to hell, but I will say that it's pretty nice, and I can't see this going away anytime soon. So anything that usually says beta is pretty much official. Not necessarily, but there's a good chance it'll become official. Anything that says experimental, by the way, try to stay away from. So that's like some good advice I could probably give you there. Okay, moving forward. So all we do with our master material here, a lot of this is just experimental nonsense that I've been messing with. So we can just get rid of this. It doesn't really matter. We can move this aside for now. This was me messing with glass textures and stuff. But the whole point of this is to create a system in which this material will function for everything. Do I want this to be have opacity, such as be a glass window? Okay, if I do, then it will use this parameter right here, the switch parameter. If you don't know what a switch parameter is, it's the same thing as a branch, okay, essentially, but it allows you to turn things on and off. So if we do this, we can just say static switch parameter. It's under the parameter section. And all this does is it basically lets us say we want to bring something in if it's true, we want to switch to a different mode if it's false. You know, like a railroad track where you just like switch the tracks. That's all this is. And this will be changeable depending on what we call this. This will be changeable inside a variant version, a material instance of this master material. So let's actually see what that looks like. Okay. So the next thing you can do right away to start testing with this is get like a box, a cube, anything in your game that you can mess with. So let's just add a cube real quick. Okay, there we go. And let's add a material here. So we're just going to make a material instance where all material instances start with mi underscore. Get in the habit of that. It's important. And we're going to say tutorial mat. And that's going to be our material. So let's put that on the cube. Okay, so this is what our tutorial material looks like. Okay. And this child, this material instance comes from this master parent right here, this master material. Okay. So anything that we do inside the master material will give us options so that we can adjust and change this one. So let's open up this one because this is our instance. And you're going to start getting all these different types of checkboxes that you can use. Okay. So what are these? Where do these come from? What's going on? These are, remember the opacity one? Okay. See how it's a checkbox? This comes from here. This is a switch parameter. So again, if you want to add something such as switch parameter, we could do something like this. I don't want to mess up this one too much because this is actually one of my main ones, but I'm just kind of showing you a comparison so you can kind of follow along. So if you add a switch, something really simple you could do is you can make a texture sample. So we could say texture. We could do a parameter for color if we want to do like a parameter, like a vector parameter. This is just like a flat. This is like a mathematical color. Whenever you use a vector parameter. So we could say, like, plug this into true, okay, and then we could say, you know what, let's do another one and plug this into false. So that way, if this one is set to true, we will use this different type of material. If it's set to false, oh, I copy and pasted that. I forgot you can't do that. You got to do vector parameter. You got to do them individually so that they are not the same on the same memory channel. So yeah, we'll change this one to like green, whatever. There we go. And so what this would do in theory, is, and I'll show you a different example in a minute, is it'll form a button that will be labeled whatever we call it. So we could say like swap color, whatever. And it will, if it's true, it'll be red. If it's false, it'll be green. Okay, so that's what that would do. That's like a basic version of what you would do with a lot of these switch parameters. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to get those switch parameters in place on things that you think you want options for. So, for example, if false, we want one opacity, right, which means none. If true, then we want to have whatever it is that we set it to. Okay, so let's do that right now. So this one's going to say true. We want to use opacity. We turn this on, and then we could actually go in here and I could start changing my opacity values, and it would be like, you know, different blending that we can use and so forth. Another example is I could say, like, let's see another one that I've got here. And all I have is I just have the front material is what plugs into your substrate slab. This is called a slab BSDF. If you don't want to know what that is, you just do substrate slab BSDF. There it is. Boom. And that's all that plugs into this. It should automatically give you one when you are if you switch and convert over to substrate. But if you don't, well, then you don't have to worry about this. This instead would just go right to like your material color or whatever your output is. So like if this was the color, for example, it would just go like right in here like that. Okay. But it's not, it's going into opacity. And you would just bypass this purple node. But anything purple, that's substrate. You can ignore it if you're not dealing with it, just bypass it. But if you are using substrate, you want to use it. Now, F0, F90, this, it tells you what they all do, obviously. It's like your specular height data and stuff, saturation, brightness, fade to black, blah, 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 blah. I don't know a lot of this stuff. I mean, I kind of know some of it. Obviously, I know about the roughness and all the basics, but some of this gets a little complex. Like, I don't know what the hell this does. So some of this stuff you're just gonna have to figure out on your own. Emissive color is really important if you want to start having glows in your game. What I have for emissive, if we follow this line, is I have pure glow. If so, we want to choose whatever color it is that we pick. If false, then we want to do we have a flicker effect? Are we on a motion or not? So you can like they're just think of them like branches, right? So I build all these check boxes into place, and the whole point is to build something um, for your master material here so that it uses all these different options. So for example, glow color, this is just a parameter vector. It multiplies the parameter color by the red channel of whatever our metal is or whatever it is we want to do. And then it just says yes or no, blah, blah, blah. And I'll show you how this all works in just a second. So if we go back to our material tutorial thing here, you can see that's just how I'm getting all these checkboxes, okay? And you want to do something similar for your master material. You want to make sure that your master material has a lot of options, and it's going to get crazy, guys. Like, you're going to have a lot of weird stuff going on. So just make sure that you set it up accordingly. So it's going to be a mess, but don't worry about it. Just kind of start setting it up. I haven't had time to clean this yet. And to be fair, this is not like a really good master material, but it works. And I leave it the way it is right now. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'll fix it later. So moving forward, so let's make this emissive. So all I'm going to do, I'm trying to find a way to show you both at the same time. I guess if I cut it like this might work. So we're going to say, let's make it emissive. Let's make it flicker. Now flicker effect is enabled. So now see how it's automatically going to be a flicker effect? And so what I can do now is, since we're using a flicker effect, I can say texture or color. I can turn off these settings the way I have them set up. And I can change the colors to things that I want. I can make things flicker in different styles. If it's pure glow, I can turn this on now. Um, that will just stay pure glow. It won't flicker anymore. I can change the glow effect. Let's see, what else can I do? I can change the specular. That's pretty standard. That doesn't really show much when I'm doing glow though. Texture color. Let's see. I can inject color on a normal background. So if I turn this back off and we go to our materials, let's turn off pure glow again. Let's turn off flicker. So now we're back to a normal material. So you can see how it looks a little darker. That's because I changed the specular. We can like brighten it up. You usually don't want to go over 1.0, by the way. you want to stay between 0 and 1.0. I can change my roughness. Let's turn this on. This one says, do you want to use it or not? This one says, what is it? True or false? Okay. I'm going to turn on my global metal. Okay, so now we're going to use these. Now we got to turn these on. So now I can basically change my roughness, right? So I can make it like really rough so it doesn't reflect as much. Like this. Turn down the metallic. Okay, so now it's just kind of like standard. It doesn't really like a matted kind of texture. Or I can say, you know what, let's make this like really shiny. We want it to be like really shiny. So we can kind of make it feel like it's more metallic. See how it's kind of reflective? So there's that. So there's lots of different options you can do, but all of these are just set up like this. So I'll show you the metallic and the roughness setups right now. Um, Let's see, roughness, gotta follow the lines. It's a hot disaster. You can do Wi-Fi nodes to connect these through like nodes that are all connected via Wi-Fi, basically like remote nodes. I just haven't done it yet. So I'm not gonna get into that because that's a whole course on its own. I'm just showing you guys the basic setups. So see, this is our roughness parameter. And this basically says like this roughness equals whatever I set to right here, right? So I can scale this because this is set to whatever this is, and we're set to true on our switch. If I set it to false, that'll just use the default, which comes from our blue line channel from whatever we bring in as down here, our RGB texture. So again, if I set this to false like that, roughness off, now it's going to use whatever this default, whatever this is for our information. Okay, so it'll use these textures. So basically, I'm having toggle buttons say, do I want to use these or not? And then if I don't, what kind of mathematics do I want to use to make it kind of like something different? So that's generally how you want to get your master material to work. I'm going to show you why it's so powerful. I've shown this in the prior episode, I think, a little bit, but I just want to show you again. So we're just going to bring in a new asset. So let's go grab something really quick. Okay, so let's bring in a new rock. We're going to call this rock 2. There we go. And I'm going to grab one of these new rocks that I've been meaning to bring in. So here comes rock number 2. That's the icon for it. And then we're going to grab nature rock 2, the actual GLB file, import. And you're going to see that it's going to bring in those 3 files that we just talked about, right? You got the normal height map texture, you have the actual color texture, and then you have the RGB texture, okay, which is roughness, metallic, and all that stuff. So now all we have to do is basically we can make a material for that. So here's how that works. So all we do is we go to this material that's automatically made, or we would go to our main material and just create a child and bring it into here. Okay. But the whole point is to make sure that this becomes a child of the master. So this is what happens by default. It just sends it to like a random default. We don't want that. So we're going to choose our parent. We want to choose MMM. This is why we call it MMM, so that we know exactly what it's called. So we don't have to deal with like trying to find different versions of it. And we want to make that our master. So now this is our master. This is effectively a material instance of our master material, which is this big boy over here. Okay. So we're going to grab this material instance. We're going to turn these on, right? Because we want to use our new textures that just came in. Let's do that. Just going to drag these in, texture to texture, RGB to RGB, normal to normal. Pretty simple, right? And now let's name this properly. Always we want to have this mi underscore rock2 or whatever it's called. Let's bring our rock in. So there's our rock. Obviously it's crazy shiny. We can fix that, no problem. And this is actually a really good example of why you want to use your master material for everything in the entire game. So obviously this came in and it's super shiny. So what we're going to do is now we can use these triggers that we talked about to change what we want. So we're going to need to change our roughness for sure. Let's turn on roughness. Let's take a look at the actual object. We have some artifacting in there, so that's fine. We're going to mess with specular and roughness. Let's tone that down. Okay, let's go to our metallic. Let's turn metallic on. Let's use our own metallic. And when I turn those on, we're saying we're not going to use this channel anymore. We're going to do our own via math. And there we go. Lower this down. Not too shabby, right? Looks pretty good to me. Still a little shiny. We can tone down the specular now. Crank this up a little bit maybe. And we're not doing too bad. Um, I can crank up this again, or I can do whatever I want with it. There's a lot of different options you can do. You can also take certain uh, pre-made. You can like change these to whatever you want. Like if you have a better metallic default that you want to use for like a rock that's just kind of like a generic bumpy metallic thing, you can use that instead. You can also use your own normals to like make them kind of like generic or whatever you want to do. But anyways, so that's our rock. It is what it is. It's okay. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. Let's just kind of put it on its side there. Take another look at it. Yeah, okay. It's okay. It's a little shiny, but I'm probably gonna have to tone that down. Let's crank up the roughness here. It's a little bit better. Turn this down. You never really want to go negative. You're just basically using on and offs with stuff uh, between 0 and 1.0. So you really got to like pick it and stick with it there. You can't, if you want to add more options, you can. You can add like, do I want to use like some bumpy effects? Do I want to merge this with something else? Do I want to use a different texture? The sky's the limit. You can pretty much do whatever you want in your master material. So you can add like extra subchains that would be like, oh, mix this texture with another texture or change the size to whatever. So like for example, I could change the scaling if I wanted to, the resolution scaling. Um, I can make this a motion if I wanted to. We can we can make this texture move, which is really crazy. Um, so I can say like speed, use the speed of like 0.05, and now it like moves around, but it's still using the texture underneath. So I just want to kind of show you some like different examples of how you can do some crazy stuff with your master material and make a lot of interesting different variations. Sometimes you really need to play around with things and try to like gauge like what works best and stuff. It's tricky. It's definitely tricky. But the long story short is what we're doing is we're using one master material for everything in the entire game. And what that'll allow us to do will be really beneficial for terms of optimization because everything will basically be using the exact same material. So like this one came in a little bit better, little shiny, but not too bad. And so these rocks are all using the same master material as is everything in the entire game. So that way the actual computer doesn't have to like search too far. It doesn't have to dig through like 50 files to find different materials. So hopefully that helped a little bit. I just wanted to give you kind of like a brief outline on why you want to start thinking about having a master material set up, and why you want to have a master landscape material set up, so that you can kind of keep the game within like 2 to 3 main materials, and that way it's not fetching for all these files all over the place, and it will keep things a lot more organized. It'll give you a lot more options. And it should keep your game way more cleaner in terms of optimization. So yeah, that's usually a good pointer that not a lot of people talk about. Again, in the details section of this video, I will put the link for this auto landscape material. It's free. It's made by this guy right here, and so you can use it for your own. It's a great starter to kind of like reverse engineer from. There are other ones out there. That's not the only one, but that's just one that I recommend. That's for your landscape material. Also, remember that you want to use virtual textures for your landscape, just kind of like touching base on everything again. And for your actual assets, you want them to all be basically funneling through one main material system, which in our example here, we're using this main one right here, this main master material. Um, and if all goes well, you'll have some chaos to deal with, but it will work and you'll be happy and you'll be like, oh, I got all these different options. Also, in order to have those RGB channels, I just have like my normal plugged into a channel, which is down here, and it's just a texture, a normal texture. And then I have my RGB, same thing. That's going to be up here, the roughness and all that stuff. So that goes into these, right? So this is my RGB channel. And then I have my normal texture up here, my main texture. And when you look at things like we looked at before, like these example material instances, those are these right here. So that's how I got it so that you can just add quick textures from importing assets from wherever you're getting from. I will say that when you bring in assets from stores, sometimes they flip the RGBs incorrectly and it can cause things to look really odd, like you kind of just saw on the one there. And that's why you might have to like flip them manually and start doing your own metal and roughness and stuff. And it is what it is. So not everything's going to come in perfect. You just got to roll with it. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. Hopefully, we can get you guys rolling on some of the more crazy stuff coming up next. I'm going to be getting into a lot more fun, exciting episodes. If you liked what I gave you guys, please give it a thumbs up. I'll catch you guys later. Thank you so much.